Next, we have Commissioner Marquardt here again. That wasn't supposed to sound so like, oh God, here we go again. We are always thrilled to be joined by Commissioner Marquardt, who's going to just talk a little bit about where we're at. He gave us a brief update in his overview of the bill last week. Feels like last month. Last week about, how many people had claimed the bill. So we just wanted to kind of invite him into this conversation to give us an update. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members. I'm Paul Marquardt, Commissioner of the Department of Revenue, and it's always good to be back. I really, really do appreciate this. And, we can have all of the great bills passed and signed by the governor, but how it gets out and implemented is really going to be the key if it's going to make a difference that we want. And Mr. Williams explained all the mechanics of the bill and so forth. One thing to mention is that if done correctly, this could lower child poverty by 33%. And, you look at studies, and, quite frankly, in all the years I've been here, I've never seen any single program that we have passed in the law out of this tax committee that I think could have such a transformational, generational impact on this state. And we know if we can lower child poverty, we have better educational outcomes, stronger workforce, stronger economies, better healthcare outcomes, lower healthcare costs. It really makes a huge difference. So a major goal of Governor Walz, Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, is the implementation. And I, again, want to thank the House and the Senate for taking this child tax credit and using what Senators Rest had with the working family credit, and the House meshing those two programs together, and for many benefits, like the chair mentioned, a smoother phase out, but also I think really focused on the levers that can really reduce child poverty. So just a huge thank you for the great work the House did and the Senate did last year on putting that child tax credit together. So very quickly, I was here last week. I won't repeat much of what I said, but just on the child tax credit outreach, we know that probably 10% of the 300,000 families that could qualify have never filed taxes before. You need to file to get the credit. And so the outreach has been significant, working with the governor's office, working with many advocates around the state, over 170 free tax preparation sites, 33 grantees that were given money just to go out and advertise these credits. We have met individually with the Department of Health, Department of Human Services. So like if they're doing Medicaid or SNAP or some of these other programs that come in contact with families, they have the information to be able to connect with those families that they are currently working with. So we're looking at also working with service providers that provide services to tribal nation members to get into those communities. So we're really looking at working together with various groups who are in these spaces with children and through other programs that already exist through the Department of Health and Human Services, for example. So we're really doing those type of things. So a status report on where we're at. I gave you one a couple days ago. We now have new numbers. If I have them, here we are. So it's up to $178 million now have gone out on the child tax credit, and about $43 million on the working family credit. We're able to divide those up. And then that is 139,000 qualifying children as of this point. So again, we're looking at about 300,000 families, and so there's a lot more work to be done. And this outreach effort is going to continue throughout right to the end, April 15th. So that's the implementation is really going to be big. And like the other day I asked if whatever you can do in getting that information out to your constituents would be really, really good. And the one final thing, again, is for next year, we're looking at advanced periodic payments, working with advocates who have really been involved not only in developing the original child tax credit, but in working to now work on the advanced periodic tax credit. We're looking at a lot of different things that we'll have more to present as we go further, but we're now looking at meeting with larger groups of stakeholders as we look at an advanced periodic payment plan for that. So, Madam Chair, members, thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Any questions for the Commissioner while we have him?
Sure.
Representative Weiner.
You referenced child poverty. Can you define and what are the matrix for child poverty?
So thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Weiner. So we're using the supplemental poverty level. And I might be able to get some more help on exactly what that number is, but Minnesota is around 8 to 9%, which actually is, we rank actually pretty low in child poverty compared to other states. But for example, when the federal, in 2021, when there's the advance payment, it lowered that supplemental poverty rate from about 9.5% to about 5.2, is about a 46% cut. But what that income level is, I have to get back to you on that. I don't know if it's on the federal poverty level, a certain percent, or what exactly that measure is. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Representative Weiner?
That works.
Great.
Thank you.
So, yep, so definitely, we'll follow up, and I'm sure that our staff can get some information to you about what
Yeah.
constitutes poverty for different size families, because obviously that's a big contributing factor, so. And Representative Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Marquardt, I just had a quick clarifying question. You mentioned a percentage of filers who had never filed before that would qualify, and I just wanted to see if you could repeat that.
Oh, yes.
Commissioner
Madam
Marquardt.
Chair, Representative Lee, we think about 10% of the 300,000, so about 30,000 of those families that we think would qualify have probably not filed taxes in the past.
Representative Lee?
Thank you.
Great. And so those families are like people who don't have tax liability because they make kind of usually a very low income, and also because both the Minnesota Working Family Credit, which is based on the federal earned income tax credit, requires earning a minimum kind of a minimum level of like income in order to qualify for those refundable credits. So there are these, and they're usually really low income families who just don't end up having to file taxes. And so, yeah, that's kind of, to me, one of the really important designs of the way that we chose to do the child tax credit was just that there isn't a minimum income level. And so some of those families who are really struggling the most, but who don't qualify for refundable federal or state income tax credits do qualify for this refundable tax credit. And just as long as I'm talking about my favorite design features, I wanted to just say that most of these refundable credits, it's like, I think it's 3 kids. It's like if you have 10 kids, for example, you get the same amount as somebody with 3 kids. And so we know every kid adds a really significant cost to your household. And so one of the important things that we did here, which is different than a lot of other kind of similar programs, is that we, if you have 6 kids, you get $1,750 a head, depending on your income level. So that was actually when we adjusted that, when we uncapped the number of children that you could claim, that was an area that really had a big impact on that child poverty level. Because, larger families are just more likely to live in poverty because kids cost lots of money. So just wanted to mention that. Not that any of us know anything about that. Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry to have been coming in late. I just want to respond to Representative Weiner's point. I know we'll get more data from staff later, but what I've seen anyway is 2 adults and 2 kids. The federal poverty limit is just under $30,000 a year total. So you imagine a family of 4 living on $30,000 a year. If they're on $31,000, they are not in poverty according to our federal guidelines. So so it's a quite low limit. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. Any other questions for, thank you so much, Commissioner Marquardt, for joining us and for your continued work on this.
You bet. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Absolutely,
Yep.
appreciate it. All right, next up, we have a few members of the public who are going to testify and who have sort of expertise in this area. First up, Natletha Sumo Kali. Welcome to the committee. Please go ahead and introduce yourself for the record as you get started with your testimony.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Gomez and members of the committee. My name is Natletha Sumo Kali. I'm the Economic Justice Outreach Manager at the Children's Defense Fund, Minnesota. In my role, I work with community partners statewide to help families access tax credits and other work support programs through our Bridge to Benefits and Economic Stability Indicator tools so that they can achieve economic stability for themselves and their families. As a recipient of an outreach grant funded last session, I want to thank you all. With that support, we have been able to add the Minnesota Child Tax Credit to our Bridge to Benefits and Economic Stability Indicator tools. We've also been able to work with partners to help families in every corner of the state to better understand their CTC eligibility and make sound financial budgeting decisions for their family. Through our connections with families in focus groups and surveys, we hear about how this policy will help families achieve their goals and invest in a better future for themselves and their children. One family in White Bear Lake in one of our focus groups described the CTC as a breathing room in her tight monthly budget. Another family described the CTC as a cushion. I know we were just talking about the phase out and you know, families working to manage working to live on wages and public benefits at the same time. She mentioned the CTC as being an extra cushion as her family comes up against emergency expenses. We've also done a couple of scenarios in our Economic Stability Indicator tool to get a better understanding of the impact that CTC, the Minnesota CTC has on families' bottom line. And we've looked at married families and single households as well. And in every scenario, the trends are the same. The CTC help families move beyond this precarious paycheck to paycheck existence where one unforeseen expense can destabilize the whole family. And as you all know, that leads to, it negatively impacts the lifetime trajectory of the children. In our analysis on our Economic Stability Indicator tool, we also see that the positive impact that CTC has is greater for families with smaller children. As you all know, families with smaller children have expenses as far as like childcare expenses. So this extra funding coming into the household, it goes a long way to kind of go towards some of those expenses as well. So we see that the impact is greater for families with smaller children, especially as they're working to, again, manage wages and then programs and tax credits to meet their needs. So we want to thank you for making this critical investment in children in the state of Minnesota. We at CDF believe that when all of our children do better, our state does better. So we want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to speak with you all today, and thank you for your investment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony and sharing the experiences of people that you work with who are directly impacted by our work. We don't always get to hear those voices, so we appreciate it. And thanks for all your work working for kids in our state.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Next up is Nan Madden. Welcome back to the committee, Ms. Madden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Nan Madden. I'm director of the Minnesota Budget Project, which is a program of the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits that identifies and advances policy changes to make Minnesota a place where everyone can thrive, regardless of who they are or where they live. You're hearing from other testifiers about the real difference that the child tax credit can make for Minnesota families. And I'm going to speak about the role of nonprofit organizations in implementation, especially in education and outreach to potentially eligible families. We know that the child tax credit is a proven strategy to reduce child poverty and improve family economic security. And a well-designed child tax credit like ours can be especially effective in reducing hardship among children living in rural areas, in communities of color, and in larger families. But reaching that full promise of the child tax credit comes down to implementation, ensuring that eligible families learn about the credit and apply for it by filing their income taxes. And as you heard, that means we need to reach Minnesotans who don't regularly file income taxes because they're not required to do so, as well as reaching those who face financial and language barriers to filing. We think Minnesota's nonprofits have an important role to play in that as trusted community voices. So after the 2023 tax bill passed, we started working in collaboration with our partners so that nonprofit organizations have the information and resources to educate and support eligible families. We did that through making sure that nonprofits learned about the opportunity to apply for the outreach and education grants that were funded by the 2023 tax bill, and especially those nonprofits with strong connections to impacted communities. And we also found ways for nonprofits to provide feedback to the Department of Revenue as they have put together a really strong outreach program and a set of educational materials. At the Budget Project, we're also leveraging philanthropic dollars to further expand the reach of the public investment. We're educating the more than 2,000 nonprofit members of the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits about the transformational impact that the child tax credit can have in the communities they serve all across the state. And we've created a centralized online source of information that nonprofits can use in educating their communities about the child tax credit and how to file for it. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share the role that the nonprofit community is playing in this important policy for ensuring that every child can participate in this state's opportunity and prosperity.
Thank you so much, Ms. Madden. Appreciate it. Yeah, our Department of Revenue does a lot of outreach and connecting with community themselves, but we really do rely on our partners who have more of this day-to-day connection with people. So we appreciate all of the work that a lot of people across the state have been doing on this. Next up, we have Amy Fisher. Welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Fisher. I've been a volunteer tax preparer at Prepare and Prosper, the largest free tax organization in Minnesota, for the past 3 years. I'm also a mother to 4 sons, ages 9 to 19, and have been primarily a stay-at-home parent since my oldest was born. Unlike many of the volunteers in our organization, I've never been a CPA. I'm just someone who thinks doing your own taxes is fun. The thorough training I received from Prepare and Prosper.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Okay. I've never met anybody like that.
You volunteered for the committee yourself, so.
No heckling the witnesses, please.
I apologize.
Prepare and Prosper does a thorough training for its volunteers so that, along with our review process, allows me to help about 30 families with their taxes each year. I've long appreciated Minnesota's education tax deduction, and I carefully track my 9-year-old's string-based rental fees and my 13-year-old's cello lessons, along with all of those last-minute August Target run receipts for school supplies. But most of our clients with kids don't have those records. Either they couldn't afford to pay for monthly trumpet rentals, or saving receipts was one task too many during the chaos of the new school year. The new child tax credit is there for parents without any extra effort on their own parts or regret for actions they could have taken. We all know kids are expensive, and it's only possible to cut costs so far when income is limited. My 3 kids still at home needed 4 pairs of shoes last week, and that ran us for $200 at a discount store with coupons. When my oldest comes home from college, our food disappears faster than we can buy it. For families eligible for the credit, every dollar counts. One single mom told me last week that it's getting harder and harder to stretch her child support, and her work hours are limited to her kids' school hours. She was surprised and so grateful for her larger Minnesota refund this year. $1,750 can pay for 6 weeks of school-age summer care, allowing parents more job possibilities. It'll put wiggle room into so many families' budgets and give them more choices. I volunteer with Prepare and Prosper because of the relief and gratitude of each of our customers when I tell them that their taxes will be done before they leave. And for most of them, that means a refund will be directly deposited in a few weeks. We take the stress and unknown out of the process for them, and I always leave my shift smiling. Thank you for making this possible.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fisher, for the work that you do. Even if we're all very confused how anybody would want to file taxes, but but we're glad that people like you exist out there. And just, you know, plug for everybody about VitaSites. They're around the state, and they help income qualified folks file their taxes at no cost and rely on volunteers like Ms. Fisher to make everything go around. So if you know any CPAs who aren't busy January through April, send them over. Which is a joke, but it is difficult, you know, for VitaSites to find volunteers, and they're always kind of looking for more people. So we thank you for that. All right, so that concludes our overview of the child tax credit.